Well, look who's behind in their shopping and now they need some help. It's me. I'm behind. And I need help. Today, I want to show you how to make a super easy frame with very limited tools. I'm talking like tools that you probably have in your toolbox right now. And before you say anything, I know this is like a fourth frame related video that I'm making in a row. I swear, this isn't like my new thing. I'm not just going to start making frames from now on. This is my last one, and then I'm off the stuff for good. Cold turkey, I swear. I don't have a problem. You have a problem. I can quit whenever I want. The reason I'm making another one of these is because while making the previous frames, I kind of figured out a formula for how to cut down on the process when you're in a pinch, and I think I have it down. This will be my go-to approach when I need a frame really fast and don't have time to build it completely from scratch. The secret sauce here is working with material that already exists and cutting down on how much cutting down we need to do. For this, we go to our local hardware store and head to the molding department. For those of you that don't know, molding is mainly used to cover up the transition between surfaces. So, for example, you have molding around the wall, where the wall and the floor meet, and then you also have it around doors and windows. It's just a nicely shaped strip of wood, or some other kind of material, that makes that transition look intentional. Lucky for us, because molding is so frequently used, that means that it's pretty easy to find, and most hardware stores will have rows with plenty of options with different shapes and wood types and finishes, just any kind of variety that you might want. If you ever want to get fancy, you can always choose something that has nice curves on it and a different shape at the top, but that requires one extra step of gluing, so for now, we're not going to do that. We're just going to keep it simple because we need gifts and we're freaking out and we need this done now. What you want to look for is called a backband. It's a kind of molding that has this step in it, and there are different thickness options, so you want to look for one where one of these steps is thick enough to be able to handle a screw being put through it without the wood splitting. This shape right here is perfect because this is exactly what we did in my last videos, where we had to cut out the rabbet so that the picture and the glass could sit inside the frame. With this backband as it is, that part is already done for us, so that eliminates a huge step that we needed to do. I decided to go with this unfinished oak, so I grabbed that. While you're here, you'll also want to grab anything else that you don't already have in your toolbox from the list of things we'll be using for this project. I'll have the full list in the description down below so you can check that out. The main thing that I assume you probably don't have lying around is the material for the glaze. The glaze being the see-through part of the frame that you can see the picture through. For that, you have several options. If you want to make your life super easy, make the frame that is the size of the glass or acrylic options that they have available at the hardware store. That way you don't have to deal with cutting anything. Even if your picture is slightly smaller than that standard size that you can find, you can just use a mat to fill in the blank space and still make it work and look cohesive. So grab a clear glass or acrylic for the glaze, and then while you're there, also grab a sheet of polypropylene. This will be used for the back to hold everything in, and this material works great because it's thick and it's sturdy, but you can cut it with scissors. Okay, now that we have everything, let's go back to the shop. Now, here's an important piece. Obviously, you'll have to cut the molding to size at 45-degree angles in order to actually make a frame with all of this. And the way we do that is using the miter saw. But I said that this project can be done with only the basic tools, and the miter saw is a pretty hefty piece of equipment. Did I just clickbait you? Am I one of those channels now? No, I didn't stoop that low yet. If you don't have a miter saw, then while you're still at the hardware store, ask if they have one that the customers are allowed to use, or if there's somebody that can make the cuts for you. I have never been at a hardware store that had molding with no option to make the cuts there. You'll just want to make sure that you have the measurements that you need ahead of time. That way you don't have to scramble and try to figure out how long you need each piece to be. This is the golden ticket that will save you if you don't have these large tools available to use. When cutting my piece, in order to keep everything simple, I decided to make my frame the size of the acrylic sheet that I bought, because that way I won't have to cut it down to size, which can get kind of annoying. When cutting the molding, I also want to point out that you should keep in mind that the length of the edge of the frame isn't exactly the same as the length of the piece that you're framing. This may sound confusing, but this is one of those things that you want to keep in mind ahead of time, because you will realize what I'm talking about once you make the incorrect cut and you don't have enough material, and at that point it's too late. I explained this calculation in my last video, so I'll throw it at the end of this one here as well, just because I think it's important, and I think once you see what I'm talking about, you'll know how to measure everything out correctly. And look at that! We're almost most of the way done, and it only took 5 minutes to get here. I have my 4 pieces, and now I just want to make sure that everything looks good and fits how it's supposed to before I start gluing. I mentioned this in my previous video, but one nice detail that makes a difference is to alternate how the pieces are cut. So long, short, or vice versa. This way, when you put the frame together, the grain will look like it's flowing around the wood. And it's a nice detail that you don't necessarily notice, but your brain notices, and it just makes it look nicer. Now that I know everything looks good, it's time to glue. I go grab my band clamp and... Damn it! I said limited tools. And band clamps aren't super common in small toolboxes, are they? You're killing me. It's okay. We can work around this. This is where we use tape. If we do this right, it'll work out just the same. I first start by applying glue to all the edges, and then I use the tape to wrap everything around super tightly. I wrapped one long strip of tape all the way around. That way I know that the edges of it won't suddenly start peeling around my corners, because I'm not using the best tape for this, so I'm just trying to make do with what I have. If you're buying tape, buy something a little stronger. If this is all that you have, then it's fine. We got this. After I finished wrapping it all the way around and making sure that it's tight, then I went back and taped each corner separately. Pull these as tight as you can also. You want to see the glue get squeezed out as you're doing it. That's how you know you have enough and that you're squeezing it tight enough. And then when you're done with that, go watch an episode of your favorite show or something, because the glue needs at least an hour to set. Once the hour has passed, you can untape the whole thing and see how it looks. The tape held up surprisingly well, which I was worried about because, like I said, I could have used something way stronger. But all the corners look good, minus some dried glue that's on the sides, which is expected. Seriously, if you don't have glue leaking out while you're clamping, that means you need to add more glue or you need to squeeze tighter. You don't want to glue it insufficiently. Now we grab a little bit of sandpaper and just go through all the glued edges and sand everything down. I didn't really have to spend a lot of time on this because the molding is sanded really, really well, so I just needed to get rid of that glue and make sure that the corners are smooth. Once that was done, I had to cut the piece for the back of my frame. And I didn't buy the polypropylene because I had this piece of wood and I decided to not buy more things when I have things that I can use at the shop. But I wanted to stay true to my no big tools promise, so I used this handheld saw instead of my table saw. You won't have to deal with this because if you just buy the polypropylene, you can cut it with scissors and your life will be easier than mine was. I'm just making it difficult for myself here. But once I managed to cut it out, I was ready to assemble everything and see if it fits. I like to do these little sanity checks periodically because I would rather find out that something doesn't fit earlier rather than later and then have to fix more things. Lucky for me, so far so good. Everything fits, and now I look like I have this nice framed picture of wood, which I found amusing. It's almost ready to have an actual picture inside it. Because I love a nice stain, I decided to dig through my stain shelf and see if I had anything that I could use. I had a few options here. A few darker ones that I wasn't sure were going to work as well. Then I also had this gunstock one that I rather like, but it's a bit on the red side. It is nice, but it's not really what I'm going for right now. Then I have this one. It's called Special Walnut, and I love it because of how it creates this higher contrast between the wood and the grain. That's what I'm gonna use. Then I wiped off the dust so that my finish can go on smoothly. I shook my stain so that I can make sure that nothing was settled at the bottom. And then I used some scrap fabric to apply the finish. And this is the most relaxing part of my day. I'm not even joking. Nothing beats a finish going on well-prepped wood. For some reason my footage didn't save, but after the stain was dry, I did apply 2 coats of wipe-on poly just to make sure that the wood is protected. You can apply any kind of finish that you want, but I think poly is usually the standard one, and it's also the most available one to find at any store. Once I was done, I let that dry for, I think it was an hour. And once it was done, I was ready to reinforce the corners. For this, I used corner brackets. Because the edges are glued end grain to end grain, we can't just leave them glued like that with no reinforcement. End grain just doesn't create a strong hold, and if we leave this as it is, the frame wouldn't last as long as we want it to. It takes 5 extra minutes to screw these in, and it's going to add years of life to the frame. It's seriously worth the extra time. In order to make sure that the wood doesn't split when I put in the screws, I first pre-drilled each hole a bit before putting the screw in. I also made sure that the brackets were placed so that you wouldn't be able to see them poking out if you were to look at the frame straight on. They're in the back, so no one but us needs to know that they are there. It's like Bob Ross says, they could be our happy little secret. And there, look at that. You don't even know they're there. Now we can put in a picture and see how the whole thing looks. Now, I didn't have a picture at the wood shop, but I was in the process of making Christmas cards for some of my friends, so I figured I could just throw in one of the cards in there with a mat and show how the completed frame looks. I made the card, and I know I say this a lot, but I hated it. I figured it's fine though, it'll serve the purpose. It can just be put inside the frame and you'll see how it looks. So I cut out the paper that I was going to use for the mat, and I did this using my X-Acto knife. And then I just assembled everything. You'll also notice that I added fasteners to the back of the frame so that it could be hung up on the wall. For anyone who's a returning viewer, you know that I hate hanging pictures up using nails. I'm a command strip kind of girl. I know, my friends make fun of me for it all the time, but this is one of the smallest hills that I will die on. So as soon as this video is over, I'll be removing the fasteners and throwing on my command strips. Sue me, I don't care. But here's what it looks like. The picture that I put inside with the matte color, with that white background on top of it, I'm trying to focus on the frame because that's what we're talking about here, but it's just so distracting how much I hate how this looks. The picture is just really killing it for me. The whole color scheme is off. I do really like how the frame turned out, especially with the stain and how it flows, and I'm sorry, I can't do this. I took the frame home. I put in an art piece that my friend bought me over a year ago that I actually like. And let's try this again. Now look at it. Look at that difference. This is why I appreciate good artists. It's night and day, seriously. Okay, so let's try this again. I actually like how the frame turned out. I'm really surprised that it looks this good considering the minimal effort with the rabbet already being pre-cut and the wood being sanded and not having band clamps available. In terms of most other projects that I've done, I think this is hands down the lowest effort, and you wouldn't guess that by looking at the finished product, which is great. There are no gaps in the joint, so the tape did a great job holding everything together. All in all, I will definitely be using this approach again, with maybe the addition of actual clamps versus the tape. But now that I'm done, there's only one thing left to do. Get rid of those fasteners, put on my command strips, get approval from my boss, and then put the picture up. What do you think? Do you think this is a manageable project for somebody without an actual wood shop? Let me know your thoughts and if you think you'll give this a try. And if you do give it a try, let me know how it turns out. Thank you so much for watching. I really, really hope this helps you out. And if you're giving this to somebody as a gift, I hope that you win. Because isn't this what holidays are all about? Giving somebody a gift and then winning over the gift that they give you. I like to think so. Until next time. Bye. Here we have the picture. And then the mat. And then the frame that will be going all the way around the entire thing. Let's say that the mat is 10 by 5 centimeters. An initial instinct might be to assume that you need 10 plus 10 plus 5 plus 5 centimeters of material for the frame. But this is wrong. You need to measure the outside of the frame, which is bigger than the length of the mat. How much bigger? 2 times the size of these little edges, 1 for each side. So we have to figure out what the length of those edges is, and then add that to the length of the mat. And how do we do that? Luckily, it's easy, because we're smart and we know trigonometry. First, you need to know how wide the face of the frame is. Let's say it's 2 centimeters. Second, you need to know how deep you want your rabbet to be. Let's say it's 1 centimeter. That means that we now have this triangle that has the side of 1 centimeter and an angle of 45 degrees, because that's how we cut miters for rectangular frames. So all we need is to figure out what this edge of the triangle is. And then we can add that twice to each side of our mat length. And how do we figure out this edge? Well, luckily, what we have here is a 45, 45, 90 triangle. And from trigonometry class, we know that 45, 45, 90 triangles are isosceles. So we don't even have to do any math. We just know that both of these legs are identical. So as long as you cut your miters at 45 degrees, which you always will, this will always be the case. See? That wasn't so bad. Isn't math fun? Let me know if this made sense, and good luck with your builds. Bye.